In this video, I'm going to talk about how I use spreadsheets to organize my literature reviews, and then how I turn those spreadsheets into outlines and from outlines into literature reviews. I'm going to work with two different papers here. The first one, what I have open right now, is a literature review that I wrote based on my dissertation. And this was not just a lit review, but this was what's called a meta or a literature synthesis. So the entire paper was just a synthesis of existing research. And the important thing here is just to kind of have an idea of what information I was looking for. And so what you see is that I have authors, research questions, some information about the design, because here I was really looking for a lot of deep information to be able to compare the studies, levels of analysis, methods. Most of these studies you can see, although not all of them, are quantitative, the kinds of data they use, where they were from. So for example, these are from Miami, these data are from Texas, these are from British Columbia. This is survey data, what they controlled for, because this is something that, again, differentiates across these studies. And then I have some information about effect sizes. Let's see, I'm trying to see if I have Richard search. I'm trying to make sure I have no, that's not what I'm looking for. I'm having trouble finding the original sheet that I used. Description of studies, that's not it. We'll look at this. This one is very similar, although here, this is what I originally built. And here you see I have the findings. So I would always encourage you to have that. And I had really basic information here. So you could get much more specific and find another version from a different research project, and that is research summaries. It's not going to come up. So anyway, that's just an example of how you can use your spreadsheet to have lots of information in here. A more recent study, I've done the same thing, but sort of with a slightly different purpose. And I've read a bunch of studies on student motivational beliefs, and I'm specifically interested in their findings here and what theory they use to frame the research. So there could have been other information I would have collected if I had, depending on the purpose I set for this spreadsheet. But as you can see, I use these a lot for a lot of different kinds of studies. And then I used this here to build this outline here. Oops. Come back, outline. Got big. Here it is, where I divided things up according to school level, so elementary and middle school findings, high school findings, post-secondary findings. You can divide things up as you want. The other outline I wanted to show you, for this project I actually never built a spreadsheet, and the reason I didn't is because there just wasn't a lot of research to work with. So instead I sort of started in right with this outline. And so the outline is really the outline of the whole paper, but I mostly focused on, as you can see, I mostly focused on the lit review. I laid out my intro to the problem. I laid out, and this is a paper about principal time use. I wrote out my research questions, and then I started going through the literature.
And so if you think about that funnel we talked about the other day, my first area of literature is about what we know about time use in the first place. So we know this very general sort of like what kinds of things do they do with their time. And the important thing about this outline is you'll see I'm not just saying, well, so-and-so says this and so-and-so says that and so-and-so says this. So I have my bullets are around, first, you have some older literature that says it's this. More recent literature suggests that it's diverse, but that it depends on the context. And then the second important point is that principals don't actually spend as much time on instructional management as we would expect, given that those of us who write about this think that principals would spend a lot of time on instructional management. And then I have this, and so there, I discussed a couple studies that show that support this, and instead, right, they're spending their time on administration and organizational management, student affairs, and then, of course, this exception that they spent substantial time on instructional leadership, second to student affairs. So it's not that I don't describe the studies, but I don't, again, just list them. I'm putting them and inserting them into this conversation. Second section, what affects how principals spend their time? So I had a couple of, these are my themes, right? We talked about those, organizing your studies thematically. So the first big sort of bucket is school characteristics. So school characteristics shape time use, time itself, and really what I mean by that is timing throughout the year. Student demographics, so who are the students in the school, that also shapes how how principals spend their time. And then principal characteristics themselves have been shown to be related to how principals spend their time. And so then I get into each of those, I drill down a little bit more. So in terms of school characteristics context, there's just one study that talks about this level of academic press at a school, student engagement, the percent of disadvantaged students. Here I have some school factors such as school type, school level, school size, school staff. So these are kind of like characteristics, and I have what I say is school level has support in these two studies. School size and staff size have support in these two studies. Charter school principals, so charter versus public, and I have two studies that support, I have one study that supports that there's differences and one study that supports that there's actually not differences. And then school performance. And so that, essentially looking at it, adequate yearly progress. And there was just two studies that had any findings relating to that. So time, so I do the same thing, and I will post this in case it's useful. Student demographics, principal characteristics. And then I have a section on how principals' time use matters. And then a little caveat at the end about where I say, yeah, we're talking about principals, but we should also admit that principals don't work alone, and so it's not sufficient just to talk about or focus on principals. And what I can show you is that this draft, how it ended up here as a conference paper. So I have my introduction, and this is of course a paper, right? So your thesis can be much longer, but here's my lit review. You'll see this familiar organization. So how principals spend their time. And at first, here's my nice first topic sentence. Other studies have produced similar findings demonstrating the diversity of principals' work. And so then I have studies that support that general statement. Second point here, a second key finding is principals may not spend as much time on instructional leadership as we had expected. And here these support that general finding, and then I break it down a little bit further than that. Variation in principal time use and student learning. So that was in the outline. I hadn't filled that out yet. There it is. And then the theoretical framework. So I hope this has been helpful to give you an idea of how you might go about organizing your lit review.
and go from reading to notes and spreadsheets to outlines and then to chapter.